So welcome to the Valley Film Festival. And with us right now is director of The Start of the End, Anthony DLA. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us and for talking about your short film. And welcome to Valley Film Festival. Congratulations on getting in.
Thank you. It's good to be one of the films for this year.
It's exciting, back in person, at least we're doing virtual and in person. So it's nice to be back in a hybrid way. And it's a wonderful film festival, and I'm excited for you to be a part of it. It's done great things for me, and I can only expect it'll do great things for you as well. For everybody who's watching, what is The Start of the End about?
The Start of the End, in a nutshell, is an end of the world comedy. It's about these two lifelong friends who suddenly find themselves at the end of the world, and much like in real life, they've quarantined themselves in a house, and it's the story of how they react to the end of the world and what they do inside that house.
It's was it inspired by the shutdown? When did you shoot it? Did you shoot it during the shutdown or before?
Well, funny enough, it's like the very early versions of the script when I wrote it is back in 2015. So even way back then, I was already kind of like, into that idea of like the end of the world. Little did I know it would come a few years later, but it
was prescient.
Yeah, and then we did film it in 2019. Yes.
Oh, okay, so before the actual shutdown. Well, that's good. I mean, I guess it's good that you got it done. So were you editing it during the shutdown? Is that what?
Yeah, it was actually quite a good thing in hindsight, just for the film itself, because instead of rushing it into into film festivals right after we finished it in 2019, we just kind of took a step back and let it breathe for a little bit, because I was rushing the edit because I did the edit myself. And by the end of 2019, I already had like a locked in final cut of the film. But so when things happened, we just kind of took a step back, and obviously that slowed down post-production, but it also gave me a chance to step away from it a little bit. And then after a few months, got back into it again and kind of see it again with a fresh new set of eyes as an editor, going in there again and cut and trim it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's nice when you can get something positive to happen out of something that obviously wasn't. So you're into the end of the world. You're into that. Why are you into the end of the world? And after experiencing the current whatever this is, are you still into the end of the world?
I know I'm into sci-fi most of all, but like specifically the end of the world stories, just because it's a situation that we wouldn't or hadn't before realized it would happen in real life, but of course it did happen. And one of the things I like about the end of the world is or those kinds of situations is how humans would react, and what that does to the way we look at each other, look at life, and how we respond to it.
Yeah, and it only can happen once too. So it's kind of a finite experience, no matter how it turns out for anyone. Your film has a lot of animation in it, like just a ton of animation. Tell me a little bit about why why you went that route, and do you have a background in animation yourself?
I don't. Other than I grew up in the 80s and 90s in Saturday morning cartoons, and I'm completely obsessed with animation and just the cartoons I grew up with. But initially, when we were prepping for the film, those flashback scenes were originally supposed to be live action, like we were supposed to film. But during pre-production, we sort of took a step back and looked at the budget, and what would make it a more interesting visual storytelling is, why don't we just infuse some animation into it, and if you watch the film, you actually see three different ways that we serve animation. Is one is in the flashbacks, which you see visually while you're hearing the dialogue of the present time, and then the second animation is our fun end credit scene, which is a whole style on its own. And then the third is just kind of the surprise at the end where you find out it's sort of, yes, yeah.
You have to see. You have to see the short to see what he does there.
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved your short. I love the ingenuity of it. I love that you problem solved that you couldn't shoot the live action flashbacks with the much simpler animation. I say that a little sarcastically because that's a lot of work. And I noticed at the end credits you had a whole bunch of people. How'd you get for a short film, especially? How did you get so many folks to animate for you? How did you get that?
Well, that's actually an interesting story in itself too, because it was like right in the middle of the pandemic. Right in the middle of 2020. We had taken a pause on post-production, and right in the middle of 2020, I decided, you know what, it's time to maybe, like, some companies are opening up and they need work to do. So I just started Googling all sorts of animation companies, kind of see who would take a chance on this fun little project. And coincidentally, I found this great animation company based in Asia, in the Philippines, exactly, which is my home country. Yeah, I was born and raised in the Philippines, and it was just kind of the perfect way to work on this film, is find an animation company based there. A company called Toon City Animation. And they were actually the prominent animation company for Disney in the 90s, with their direct-to-video movies and the TV shows. They were like the number one animation company that worked with Disney on those. So I got to talking to them, and we worked out, a fantastic deal, and they were all on board with the kind of animation and story that I wanted to tell.
It's fantastic, and it's a great win, for you to get them, and I think even better that it's it's from the country you were born and raised in.
Yeah,
that's amazing. What I love about your film is it is a very simple movie, and yet it's incredibly complex. Like you could have, for a short film, you want to always sort of stack the cards in your favor because it's a lot of work, and and you don't have a lot of money. But you went a totally different route and decided, I'm going to have a very simple premise, and I'm going to make it as complex as possible to execute. When you shot the film and you're in the set with where they are predominantly, occasionally we see a little bit of a view of what's going on the outside. You weren't thinking animation though back then, were you?
No. Like I said, the very early versions of the script I wrote in 2015. And initially it was just sort of started like as an exercise for me to write a short that took place in only one setting. So if you watch the film, like you can see, like there's additional stuff there now, but like primarily it takes all place in one room. The characters go in and out of it, but it's always the same room. So that's kind of how it started is super simple. It's just two guys talking, two characters in one setting. And then it just kind of evolved from there and added some elements to it.
Well, it's very clever and unique in how you went about executing it, and how you made it a little more complicated, instead of just two guys.
Yeah.
And pulled it off. Tell me about the actors. Who are these two gentlemen that joined you on this crazy journey, and what was it like working with them?
They were great. They're two of the greatest improvisers that I've ever worked with. I've done a few short films, in the recent years, and they really go off. And going into it, we were trying to cast two actors that just had chemistry. That was just my main goal. And then I couldn't really see anybody in those roles, but during pre-production, I just was sort of watching this thing on TV, and it made me remember this actor named Harvey Guillen that I watched when he first started. There's this show he was on called Huge back then on ABC Family, and actually the actress that played his twin sister in that show was actually a friend of mine in real life. So that just kind of got me thinking of him and how even back then in one of his first shows, he was extremely talented. Of course, now we know him as Guillermo in What We Do in the Shadows, and he's fantastic in that show. But I sort of in pre-production thought of him sort of as one of the characters, because I knew what he was capable of. And then so he was the first we locked in, and then fortunate that we got him on board, and then we did a general casting call for the other part, just to kind of see who he would kind of match with. And we found this great actor, Chris Boudreau, who just kind of coincidentally is also like friends with Harvey in real life. Okay. So some of the chemistry comes from there because they're already, friends and familiar with each other. So
it makes it a lot easier when you already have a connection to the cast, already has a connection to each other.
Yes,
it certainly can make. So was there a lot of improv in the movie? How'd that go?
Yeah. So going into it, after we cast the both of them, I was really kind of talking to them about, you guys make this your own. There's certain beats that, certainly we want to stick with, the general stories and dialogue that they would say has to kind of be the same, because there's a sort of escalation going throughout the story. Yeah. So, but in within those stories that they tell, I told them to just kind of make it their own and improvise, and they surely did. Yeah.
Did it make it editing or putting the film together difficult for you, or was it? Did you find it easy? Like what? It
was definitely challenging, because as on set, I was just having so much fun with how they were improvising. At moments on the set, I would think about, let's hit this beat, so it would make my life easier in the edit. But when I was actually doing the edit, it was quite difficult, because there was a lot of great jokes in there, and just choosing the right ones and matching it with the others was a challenge in itself.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think it'd be a really hard, especially with two actors who are probably have a lot of fun playing with each other, and clearly they did. I love the theme of the movie, that they're this one doesn't give away too much, that they're revealing it's the end of the world, and they're revealing things about each other that they're trying to get off their chests. Mm-hmm. And did you find that, like, are there things that you would reveal, like that you feel like you would have if the end of the world was happening now instead of very slowly, which is now it's happening? Would there be things that you're like, oh, like, are there people and stuff that you meet, like, did that come from a personal desire to I don't know, to apologize? I mean, what did you do? Is what I want to know, Anthony. What did you do to people that you feel guilty about?
I'm taking all my secrets to the grave.
As you should. Why did you become a filmmaker? Like, why did you dive into making movies? And I'm assuming you've made other ones as well.
I've always loved movies. Even back when I was younger and didn't even realize I loved it that much. And in my adult years, I began to think about, how would I be involved in this thing that I love so much? And it's a difficult thing to go into if you don't know exactly what you want to do. The entertainment industry, the film industry is so large, and there's so many roles, and I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. So I just kind of tried, writing classes at first, and thought, I would just write. And then I met a bunch of people who made short films, and from then, I directed one of the early scripts I wrote and discovered, oh, I want to direct. That's kind of where I'm headed into. So it was kind of like a journey of discovery for myself,
Nice. Well, welcome to filmmaking and
thank you.
And succeeding at it, and the pain of it as well. It can be a
Glad to be here.
What was like the hardest thing that you had to do? What was like the hardest part of the production for you, or was or even the post-production?
Yeah, I mean, I love being on set. That was my favorite part. I put a lot of emphasis on pre-production, because I recently heard this very great quote from Anthony Bourdain. It's prior preparation prevents piss poor performance. And as much importance as I put on pre-production, I guess the difficult part really is the post. Not the least, but it happened in 2020, so there are a lot of unique challenges with that.
Well, you'd have to be sending files back and forth to the Philippines too, right? I would assume.
Yeah, well,
remotely.
that too, and also just kind of like the time crunch of it, because obviously with us having finished filming in 2019, everyone was kind of getting antsy, and I was certainly getting impatient of like, well, it's going to be 2 years now since we shot it, so.
Yeah, that happens, man. Don't worry.
Yeah, there's that, and I've been hearing a lot of stories of that too. Like sometimes, films that have been shot never get released.
It's really true. Finishing something is a remarkable, part of being successful, and going, hey, you finished it, regardless of all the other, things you hope for,
yes,
getting it done, because you're right, they don't always,
Yeah, but your will of force just forced the completion of this, and I'm glad it's finally out.
I enjoyed it a lot, and kudos to you for sticking through it and not giving up on it, and then pivoting when you found that you needed to do something different. And in fact, I would say that difference is sort of the difference in this short for you, because I don't know if it would be the same without all that animation and and some of the things that happen at the end that we won't give away that are kind of fun.
Yeah.
What films inspire you? Like what movies? Like if you're like, I know, like whenever I'm about to direct, I sit down and I watch a couple movies, for myself, or I'll make my DP look at a film, and as a reference. What's your go-to film to get you excited to get into production?
Edgar Wright films. It's as simple as that. And I think with some moments in the start of the end, you can see like some of the influences of that, because Shaun of the Dead is right there. It's one of my favorite movies. Hot Fuzz certainly, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. So there's a lot of influence that I get from his movies and then his directing. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see that, and I thought about those films a little bit when I was watching, especially like your color palette and the and some of the choices that you were going for in executing it reminded me a lot of that, actually. So that's great. Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for talking to us, and congratulations again on making it into the Valley Film Festival. It changed my life, and I hope it changes your life too, man.
Thank you, David.